I know, I just couldn't believe, I like that snap neck move he did, the perfect plex, a standing drop kick, and he had the good mic skills.
I got news for you. Guess who was his baby face that did a job for him his first time in? Me.
Oh.
So here's the deal.
I don't think they ever aired that match.
I had just hurt my neck with the big boss man.
Okay.
You know, he did about 10 Bubba slams a night. And, boy, I hate taking those. You know?
Was this when he was, like 400 pounds?
He was huge.
Okay, this is like, cause he got in better shape a couple years later, but he was pretty big when he first came in.
This was the beginning. The
Okay.
first time I met him. He just came in, and I was his job guy, and, man, he hurt my neck. And now my neck is better now, but I was afraid that it would be chronic, and now it's, much better. As a matter of fact, it's painless. I just couldn't stand to take his Bubba slam. He was so strong, and we even had an argument. And he said, "You take it for Arn Anderson, why can't you take it for me?" And I said, Arn Anderson is better than you. I said, he does it, you can't feel it. He's an artist. And he really is. Arn Anderson was, he doesn't get a lot of credit, but let me give him some credit. I took all his, he had innovative stuff he did, and him and Tully both. And everything they did was looked devastating, it didn't hurt.
Yeah.
And that's the key to wrestling. Boss Man was a big, strong guy, and I gave him my body trying to get over, and he hurt me. So when I wrestled Mr. Perfect, I had a bad neck, and I told him I did. But that guy, let me tell you, he's like the greatest wrestler ever. He made me look good, and then he killed me, but without hurting me. And then he thanked me afterwards, and I've loved wrestling Mr. Perfect. And then when I turned around and was his manager, he's an artist. He was like God's gift to wrestling.
It's a shame he never became, because those days, there's a lot of guys that should have been world champion, never got it. Like, I think Rude, DiBiase, him, Bulldog, those are some top names, I think, that never got the title that probably should have had it.
Well, they can't, a lot of it's, you can't all be a champion, right?
Yeah.
The thing is, I decided at the age of 54 not to moon and spoon about what might have been and just be glad for what I got. And the fact that I survived it and the fact that I enjoyed it. And there's another thing wrestlers don't mention. I've been all throughout Europe, Australia, New Zealand, every place.
Okay.
Didn't cost me a dime. If you want to go those places, you got to spend money. So why can't I say that I'm appreciative that I got to fly around? And I was the kind of guy that look out the windows. I didn't just see the inside of a plane, the inside of a locker room, the inside of a bar room, and the inside of a hotel room. I looked out the window and saw the sights of wherever I was at. And I tried to gain culture by it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's like you could be on vacation but miss everything.
Okay. Right after the April 1990 Saturday Night's Main Event, you and Hulk Hogan, it was Mr. Perfect against Hulk Hogan, and that was like your last appearance with him, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then why did they decide to split you guys?
Well, I never got the memo. I just knew that I was going to split from him.
Okay.
I have no idea. And the thing is, instead of worrying about, why did they split us up, I was just glad that that we were together in the first place. Because it was definitely the best 4 months of my career. And I always knew that it would end. I didn't expect it to end so soon, but I was just thrilled that we got together at all. Perfect and he never were close for many years.
Yeah.
And it was all for the best. I mean, Bobby Heenan is probably the greatest manager ever. I don't want to say that in front of Jimmy Hart.
Those are the two I always think of, the top two. I'd never know which one's really better. Those are the two I would consider the top two managers of all time.
Well, Heenan was not just a manager. He was a color man with Gorilla Monsoon.
Yeah.
And he was always funny. Always had a good line. And just a great salesman of wrestling. In other words, he was a scene stealer, too. He was excellent. And, I really feel terrible because I guess, I don't know if he chewed tobacco or whatever, but he got cancer in his mouth. Have you seen him lately?
Yeah, he doesn't look too good.
Yeah, but, you can't deny his talent. As a matter of fact, one of the managed with my father. First he managed Guy Mitchell and Joe Tommaso as the Assassins.
Okay.
And then they didn't last too long, and then he managed Angelo Poffo and Chris Markoff as the Devil's Duo. That was the days when Bobby Heenan was probably the greatest bump man ever. So by the time you saw him, he had already hurt himself enough so he couldn't take any more bumps.
All right, and then after that, they had you. You know, you were just flying around most of 1990, not doing too much. You had a couple matches, you squashed some jobbers, you put some people over, and same thing early 91. And then finally in September 91, the coach left, so you took over as the manager of the Beverly Brothers. How was that?
Well, I was just glad to get myself back in there. I had been fired. I was on the shelf for about 6 months. I was just glad to come back. You know, the phone rang. I certainly wasn't doing anything. I was glad to come back.
Now, I noticed some of their matches against jobbers, they worked pretty stiff with that, what do they call it, the Beverly Bomb, they call that move or whatever, when they would spike the guy's head into the canvas, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I used to watch that, and I used to be grateful that I didn't have to wrestle the Beverly Brothers. You know, they didn't seem to me to be taking care of their opponents. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Would you have liked to have taken that spike head thing?
No, it always looked like them, and like the Steiner brothers, like with Scott Steiner looked like he tried to kill some of those guys too.
But see, Arn Anderson did that stuff, and he never hurt you.
Yeah.
You know, but you're talking about it like a phenomenal talent, you know. And I'm not knocking either one of the guys. I just thought, God, you know, I had a ringside seat, right, as a manager.
Yeah.
And I used to have to turn my head. I said, they're killing those guys. You know, and then when they wrestled the top guys, you wouldn't see those moves. See, so what does that tell you? They're taking advantage of the other guy. Because, in other words, if you're a job guy and that's your job,
Yeah.
you know, you might get your butt kicked in the ring carelessly by people that don't love you. But when you turn around and wrestle somebody else, how come you don't see those moves?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, anybody can do those type of moves, but can you do it without hurting the other guy? You know, the show is one thing, but the other, you know, hurting people is, how hard should I hit you? Just as hard as I expect to get hit back. You know, but the job guys aren't allowed to hit you back, because they won't be job guys anymore, they get new ones. You know, I'm just saying there's a picking order in wrestling, and I've been to the top and the bottom, and I'll tell you, I'll ask you a question for me, and then I'll answer it. Was it worth being a jabroni for 21 years so you could be on top for 4 months? Answer, yes. In other words, especially now as an old man, I look back on those 4 months as, was it worth it? Yes. Of course it was worth it. Let me ask you, Todd, would you do it? I bet you would.
If you could tell your kids you have a victory over Hulk Hogan, I mean, that's just impressive.
Well, and then I got a website where I have selective amnesia.
Yeah.
I only put the good things, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Because there'd be a hell of a lot of bad things. I'm sure when you email me all the matches you have, I'm sure you'll be lucky to find one that I want to remember. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, you know, I had to check my ego. See, look at the difference between me and David Sammartino. He refused to take it. I said, I'll take it. You see what I mean? They're giving me breadcrumbs. I'm sucking hind tit on the south. It's an expression. Are you ever from the farm? You ever heard that one?
No, I didn't hear that one.
Sucking hind tit on the south.
Okay.
Meaning all these piglets are born. The best pigs get the top tits. The hind tit is the runt. You know. So I'm sucking hind tit on the south. David Sammartino says to hell with it. And he doesn't do it. I said, well, I better suck hind tit on the south because that's where the money is. It's the most money I can make. And I did it, and I did it. And I was always on time. I always did my best. You know, they can't say that I didn't show up or that I couldn't pass a drug test. You know, and then next thing you know, I get a break. Many years later. And sure, it was no fun, but see, I used to like think of the bright side. Can you make more money doing something else? I asked myself. Answer, absolutely not. So it's a shit sandwich, eat it or starve.
Yeah.